Before we get into what might be one of the most disturbing stories I've ever covered from Afghanistan, I need you to do me a favor. If you're enjoying these real military encounters with the unexplained, hit that like button right now. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? These stories come from real soldiers, real deployments, and they deserve to be heard. Now, whether you're watching this at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep, or during your lunch break trying to kill some time, just remember that what you're about to hear has been corroborated by multiple sources. This isn't some campfire story. This happened. And it's happening right now, tonight, somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan. The year was 2011, and forward operating base Scorpion sat roughly 15 kilometers outside of Kandahar city, Afghanistan. The base was nothing fancy, just another collection of reinforced barriers, plywood buildings, and sleeping tents that housed approximately 200 coalition forces. British, Canadian, and American soldiers all shared this piece of hostile desert, united by the common goal of hunting Taliban insurgents and securing the region. But something else was hunting in those mountains. Something that didn't carry an AK-47 or plant IEDs. Something that announced its presence with a sound that every soldier who heard it would never forget. A whistle. Not just any whistle, but a melody that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. A tune that followed patrols through the darkness and seemed to know exactly where they were going before they got there. This is the smoke pit, and this is the true story of the Whistler of Kandahar. Staff Sergeant Michael Djinn had been deployed to Afghanistan 3 times before, but this rotation felt different from the moment he arrived. He was a squad leader with the 101st Airborne Division, responsible for 9 soldiers who ranged from combat veterans to fresh-faced privates on their first deployment. Djinn had seen his share of firefights, survived more than a few close calls with IEDs, and earned a Purple Heart for shrapnel wounds he'd taken during his second tour. He wasn't the type to spook easily. But 3 weeks into the deployment, something happened that made even Djinn start to question what was possible and what wasn't. It started on a routine night patrol. Djinn's squad was tasked with moving through a series of villages along Route Cyclone, a dirt road that wound through the mountains north of the base. Intel suggested Taliban fighters were using the route to move weapons and supplies, and the mission was simple: observe, report, and if necessary, engage. Standard stuff for anyone who'd spent time in Helmand Province or Kandahar. The squad stepped off from Phobie Scorpion at 2200 hours. The night was cool by Afghan standards, maybe 70 degrees, with a half moon providing just enough light to see the terrain without needing night vision constantly. They moved in a staggered column formation, maintaining 10-meter intervals between soldiers, weapons at the ready, every sense tuned to the environment around them. Specialist Travis Morrison was walking point, leading the patrol with his rifle up and his head on a swivel. Behind him came Private First Class Sarah Kim, then Corporal James Butler, and so on down the line until Djinn brought up the rear, constantly checking their 6 o'clock position to make sure nothing was sneaking up behind them. They'd been moving for about 45 minutes when Morrison raised his fist, signaling the patrol to halt. Everyone dropped to one knee, scanning their sectors, waiting for Morrison to indicate what he'd heard or seen. Chen moved forward quietly, closing the distance until he was beside Morrison. "What have you got?" Chen whispered. Morrison pointed ahead, toward a cluster of mud brick buildings that marked the edge of the next village. "Movement, Sergeant. Maybe 100 meters out. Can't tell if it's civilian or military age male." Chen pulled out his night vision binoculars and scanned the area Morrison had indicated. At first he saw nothing, just the usual landscape of Afghan poverty, crumbling walls, and scattered debris. But then he caught it, a figure moving between buildings, too far away to make out details but definitely human-shaped. "Could be Taliban spotting for us," Chen said quietly. "Could be a local heading home late. We'll move in slow, clear the village building by building. Pass it down." Morrison nodded and began hand-signaling the plan to Kim behind him, who passed it to Butler, and so on down the line. The squad began to move forward again, slower this time, more deliberate. They were maybe 50 meters from the first building when they heard it. A whistle, clear, melodic, and completely out of place in the middle of a combat zone. The entire squad froze. Chen felt his blood run cold, not from fear exactly, but from the sheer wrongness of the sound. It was a tune, something almost familiar, like a children's song you'd heard once but couldn't quite place. It echoed off the mountains, seeming to come from everywhere at once, and it was moving. The whistle started somewhere ahead of them, in the direction of the village, then seemed to circle around to their left flank, then behind them, then to the right. "What the hell is that?" Kim's voice came over the radio, tight with tension. "Stay alert," Chen responded. "Could be Taliban trying to spook us. Maintain formation, and keep moving forward." But even as he said it, Chen wasn't sure he believed it. The T-Spawn used a lot of psychological warfare tactics, everything from playing recordings of screaming children to leaving threatening notes on patrol routes. But whistling? And a whistle that seemed to be circling their entire patrol? That was new. They continued forward, weapons up, every soldier scanning a different direction. The whistle continued, that same melodic tune, repeating over and over, never quite loud enough to pinpoint, but never fading away either. It was like having a song stuck in your head, except the song was real, and it was coming from the darkness around them. "Sergeant Chen, I've got eyes on something," Butler called out from his position in the middle of the patrol. 11 o'clock, maybe 70 meters. Looks like a person just standing there." Chen moved to Butler's position and looked in the direction he'd indicated. Sure enough, there was a figure standing in the open, silhouetted against the lighter-colored sand. It was too dark to make out features, but the posture was strange. Too straight, too still. Like a mannequin someone had placed in the middle of nowhere. "Challenge them," Chen ordered. Butler raised his rifle and shouted in Pashto, the local language, announcing they were coalition forces and demanding the person identify themselves. There was no response. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, didn't react in any way, just stood there, perfectly still. And the whistling continued, that same melody, now seeming to come directly from where the figure was standing. "Fire a warning shot," Chen said. Butler aimed his rifle into the dirt several meters in front of the figure and squeezed off a single round. The crack of the gunshot echoed across the valley, startling a few birds from a nearby tree. But the figure didn't move, didn't flinch, nothing. "That's not right," Morrison muttered from his position. "Nobody stands still when you fire near them. Either they run or they shoot back." Chen keyed his radio, contacting the Combat Operations Center back at FOB Scorpion. "Scorpion COC, this is Shadow 2-1. We have a possible hostile contact. Grid November, Delta 573894. Request thermal scan from any available ISR." The COC came back after a moment. "Shadow 2-1, we have a Reaper overhead. Stand by for thermal." Chen waited, his eyes never leaving the figure. Somewhere above them, an MQ-9 Reaper drone was adjusting its camera, pointing its thermal imaging system at their location. If that figure was human, the drone would pick up its heat signature clear as day. "Shadow 2-1, this is Reaper 2-3, a new voice came over the radio. This one, belonging to the drone pilot probably sitting in a comfortable chair somewhere in Nevada. "I'm looking at your grid right now. I've got 9 thermals in patrol formation. That's you guys. But I'm not showing any other signatures in your immediate area. Whatever you're looking at isn't putting out heat." Chen felt his stomach drop. "Say again, Reaper 2-3. You're not seeing anything at approximately 70 meters. Bearing 295 from our position?" "Negative, Shadow 2-1. I've got clear thermal on your location and surrounding area. If there's something there, it's not alive. Could be a scarecrow, could be a mannequin, could be Taliban trying to draw you into an ambush. Recommend you do not approach." But even as the drone pilot spoke, the figure began to move. Not walking exactly, but gliding, sliding across the ground without any visible leg movement. It moved laterally, from left to right across their field of view, covering maybe 20 meters in a few seconds, then stopped again, still whistling, always whistling. "Reaper, are you seeing this movement?" Chen asked, his voice more urgent now. There was a pause. "Shadow 2-1, I'm not showing any movement in your area except for your patrol. Are you sure you're not looking at shadows or a trick of the light?" Chen looked at his soldiers. They could all see it. Morrison, Kim, Butler, every single one of them had their eyes locked on that figure, watching it glide impossibly across the terrain. This wasn't a trick of the light. This was real. "Break contact," Chen ordered. "Everyone pull back 20 meters, maintain security, and prepare to move back to base." The squad began to withdraw, moving backward while keeping their weapons trained on the figure. As they moved, the figure followed. Not rushing, not attacking, just maintaining that same 70-meter distance, always staying just far enough away that details were impossible to make out in the darkness. And the whistling got louder. That same tune, over and over, drilling into Chen's skull until he wanted to scream just to drown it out. He recognized the melody now, or thought he did. It was "Ring Around the Rosie," that old children's song about the plague. But the tune was wrong somehow, distorted, like someone had remembered it incorrectly and was whistling their broken memory of it. They made it back to FOB Scorpion without incident, though the whistling followed them the entire way, only fading out once they were within 100 meters of the base perimeter. As they cleared their weapons at the entry control point, Chen noticed that several of his soldiers were shaking, and it wasn't from the cold. "Debrief in 30 minutes, Chen told them. "Get some water, get your head straight, and meet me at the TOC. We need to report this." The Tactical Operations Center was busy when Chen arrived. Officers and enlisted personnel monitoring radios, tracking friendly positions on digital maps, coordinating resupply missions. Captain Rodriguez, the company commander, saw Chen come in and waved him over. "Chen, I heard you had an interesting patrol. The Reaper feed showed you guys backing away from something, but the thermal wasn't picking anything up. What happened out there?" Chen took a breath and began his report, keeping his voice professional and factual. He described the whistling, the figure that didn't show up on thermal, the way it moved without walking. As he spoke, he watched Rodriguez's expression change from curious to concerned to something that looked almost like recognition. "Show me exactly where this happened," Rodriguez said, pointing to the map table. Chen indicated the location, and Rodriguez stared at it for a long moment. "That's the third report we've had from that area. In the last month. Different units, different times, but the same basic story. Something that whistles, something that follows patrols, something that doesn't show up on thermal." "Has anyone engaged it?" Chen asked. "One patrol did. British unit out of Camp Bastion. They put about 50 rounds into this figure they saw, claimed direct hits. But when they moved forward to check the body, there was nothing there. No blood, no shell casings that had hit anything, just empty ground." And the whistling continued. Chen felt his mouth go dry. "What are we dealing with here, sir?" Rodriguez looked around the TOC, making sure no one else was listening close enough to overhear. "Officially, mass hallucination brought on by stress and sleep deprivation. That's what it'll say in the report. Unofficially, the locals have stories about something they call the Whistler. They say it's been in these mountains for hundreds of years, maybe longer. Some kind of spirit or demon that feeds on fear. It finds military units, follows them, whistles that same tune over and over until soldiers start to lose their minds. That's insane, sir." "Is it? You saw it yourself. Your whole squad did. And you're not the first, Chen. You're just the latest." Rodriguez pulled out a folder from his desk and opened it. Inside were dozens of incident reports, going back months. Different units, different nationalities, all reporting the same thing. The whistling. The figure that didn't show up on thermal. The psychological effects on soldiers who encountered it. "What psychological effects?" Chen asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. "Paranoia, insomnia. Some soldiers start hearing the whistling even when they're back on base, even when no one else can hear it. A few have had complete psychological breaks and had to be medically evacuated. One Canadian soldier threw himself off a guard tower 3 weeks after encountering the Whistler. Left a note saying he couldn't get the sound out of his head. Chen looked through the reports, reading accounts that were nearly identical to what he'd just experienced. And all of them came from the same General area: a roughly 20 square kilometer zone in the mountains north of Kandahar. Why hasn't this been reported up the chain? Chen asked. It has been, multiple times, and every time it gets classified as combat stress or dismissed as local superstition. Nobody wants to be the officer who officially reports that there's something supernatural hunting American soldiers in Afghanistan. Career suicide. So what do we do? Rodriguez closed the folder and looked Chen straight in the eye. You keep your people together. You watch for signs of psychological deterioration. If anyone starts saying they hear whistling when no one else does, you get them to the aid station immediately. And you pray that the whistler loses interest in your squad and moves on to someone else. That's it? We just wait and hope it goes away. Unless you've got a better idea, Sergeant. Yes. That's exactly what we do. Chen left the TOC feeling more disturbed than when he'd arrived. He'd been in combat, had faced human enemies who wanted to kill him, and he'd always been able to handle that because he understood it. This was different. This was something that defied understanding, defied the rules of reality he'd built his entire life around. He went back to his squad's sleeping tent and found most of them still awake, sitting on their cots, talking in low voices. The conversation stopped when he entered. Is everyone okay? Chen asked. Morrison spoke first. Sergeant, what was that thing? I don't know. But I need you all to listen to me very carefully. If any of you start experiencing unusual symptoms, hearing things others don't hear, seeing things others don't see, I need you to tell me immediately. No tough guy bullshit. No trying to handle it on your own. This is serious. Are we going back out there? Kim asked. Eventually, yes. That's our patrol sector. But we'll be more careful. We'll request drone coverage for every patrol. We'll move in larger elements. And if we see or hear anything unusual, we break contact immediately. No trying to figure out what it is. No trying to engage. We just leave. The squad nodded, but Chen could see the fear in their eyes. They were all experienced soldiers, had all seen combat. But this was different. This was something their training hadn't prepared them for. As Chen lay in his cot that night, trying to sleep, he found himself listening for the whistle, straining to hear that melody over the normal sounds of the base, generators running, soldiers talking, helicopters taking off and landing. But there was nothing. No whistle, not yet. What Chen didn't know was that the whistler had a pattern. It started slow, following a patrol once or twice, letting them see it, letting them hear it, building the fear. Then it would appear more frequently, getting closer each time, the whistling getting louder, more insistent. And eventually, it would come for someone. Pick one soldier from the group and focus all its attention on that person, until they broke. Over the next week, Chen's squad conducted 5 more patrols in the area. 3 of them were completely normal. No whistling, no mysterious figures, just routine security sweeps. But on the 4th patrol, they heard it again. That same melody, echoing through the darkness, coming from no identifiable direction. The squad immediately broke contact and returned to base, just as Chen had ordered. The 5th patrol, was worse. They not only heard the whistling, but saw the figure again, this time much closer, maybe 30 meters away. And this time, Chen could make out details through his night vision. The figure was tall, at least 7 feet, impossibly thin, with arms that hung down past its knees. Its face, or what should have been its face, was blank, no features, just smooth, empty space where eyes and nose and mouth should be. Yet somehow, impossibly, the whistling was coming from it. From that blank face, that same tune, Ring Around the Rosie, but wrong, distorted, like a music box that had been left out in the rain and rusted into disharmony. The squad ran. Chen didn't order them to, didn't need to. They all just ran, abandoning tactical discipline, abandoning everything they'd been trained to do, and sprinted back toward the base like the devil himself was on their heels. And maybe he was. Private First Class Sarah Kim hadn't slept properly in 3 days. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard it. That whistling. That goddamn whistling that wouldn't stop, wouldn't fade, wouldn't give her a moment's peace. She'd tried everything, earplugs, sleeping pills from the medic, even playing music through her headphones at dangerous volumes. Nothing worked. The whistle cut through everything, persistent and maddening. The worst part was that no one else could hear it. When she asked Morrison if he heard whistling, he'd look at her with concern and say no. When she asked Butler, same thing. Even Sergeant Chen, who'd been there, who'd heard it out in the field, told her there was no whistling on the base. It was just her. But it wasn't just in her head. She knew it wasn't. The sound was real, external, coming from somewhere on the base. She could track it, follow it with her ears as it moved from the perimeter, to the sleeping tents, to the operations center, and back again. It was mapping the base, learning the layout, preparing for something. Kim stood at her guard post on the southwest tower, scanning the darkness beyond the perimeter walls with her night vision. It was 0300 hours, the dead of night, the time when the base was quietest, and the darkness felt like a physical weight pressing down on everything. Her shift wouldn't end for another 2 hours, 2 hours of standing and watching and trying not to think about the whistling. Except now, she was thinking about it, and now she could hear it. There, just beyond the wire, maybe 50 meters out. That familiar melody, Ring Around the Rosie, played with wrong notes, discordant and unsettling. It was moving, circling the base perimeter, and as it moved, Kim tracked it with her eyes, searching for the source. "Contact," she said into her radio, her voice tight. "I've got movement outside the wire, southwest sector. Approximately 50 meters out." The radio crackled. "Southwest Tower, this is COC. We're not showing anything on the security cameras. What are you seeing?" "I'm hearing something, sir." Whistling. "And there's something moving out there." There was a pause, and Kim could imagine the conversation happening in the Combat Operations Center. Another soldier hearing whistling. Another psychological casualty. Another one going crazy. "Southwest Tower, maintain observation. We're sending Sergeant Chen to your position." Kim continued to scan the darkness, her finger resting on the trigger guard of her M4. The whistling was getting louder now, closer, and she could see something moving in her night vision. A tall shape that seemed to glide rather than walk, approaching the perimeter wire with deliberate slowness. "It's coming toward the base," Kim reported. "Whatever this thing is, it's coming toward us." Footsteps on the tower stairs, and then Chen was beside her, his own night vision pulled down over his eyes. "Show me where." Kim pointed. "There." "You see it?" Chen looked for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Yeah, I see it. And I hear it too. That whistling is real, Kim. You're not crazy." The relief Kim felt at those words was overwhelming. She wasn't losing her mind. The whistling was real. The figure was real. Other people could hear it, could see it. She wasn't alone in this nightmare. "What do we do, Sergeant?" "We watch it. We don't engage unless it breaches the wire. And we document everything." They stood together on that tower for the next 20 minutes, watching as the figure circled the base, always maintaining that 50-meter distance, never getting closer, but never leaving either. The whistling continued without pause, that same broken melody repeating endlessly. Other soldiers had gathered at various points along the perimeter now, all of them watching the figure, all of them hearing the whistle. There was something almost hypnotic about it, the way it moved, the way the sound seemed to drill directly into your brain. Kim found herself swaying slightly, her eyes starting to close, the exhaustion of 3 sleepless nights finally catching up with her. "Kim!" Chen's voice snapped her back to alertness. "Stay awake. Don't let it lull you. I think that's part of what it does." Kim shook her head violently, trying to clear the fog that had settled over her thoughts. "Sorry, Sergeant. I'm okay." But she wasn't okay. None of them were okay. And whatever this thing was, it knew it. It was testing them, probing for weaknesses, looking for the soldier who was most vulnerable, most susceptible to its influence. The figure suddenly stopped moving. It stood perfectly still, facing the base, facing the tower where Kim and Chen stood. And even though it was too far away to see clearly, even though its face was blank and featureless, Kim had the absolute certainty that it was looking directly at her, that it had chosen her. The whistling changed. The melody was the same, but the pitch rose, became more urgent, more insistent. And Kim felt something she'd never felt before in her entire military career, the overwhelming urge to go to it, to climb down from the tower, walk across the base, cut through the wire, and go out into the darkness where it waited. Her hand moved to the ladder, preparing to descend. "Kim, what are you doing?" Chen grabbed her arm. I need to go out there," Kim heard herself say. "It's calling me." "Can't you hear it calling me?" "That's exactly what you're not going to do." Chen's grip tightened. "Fight it, Kim. Whatever this thing's doing to your head, you fight it." Kim tried. She tried so hard, but the compulsion was overwhelming, irresistible. The whistling was inside her head now, not just in her ears, but in her thoughts, in her very consciousness. It was showing her things, images of the figure, but closer now, clear enough to see details. Impossibly long fingers, joints that bent in wrong directions, skin that seemed to shift and ripple like water. And eyes. So many eyes. Not on its face, which remained blank, but everywhere else. Eyes covering its torso, its arms, its legs. Hundreds of eyes, all watching, all seeing, all focused on her. "Chen, I need backup on Southwest Tower." Chen was shouting into his radio now. "Kim's been compromised. I need immediate assistance." Footsteps on the stairs, multiple people coming up fast. Morrison appeared first, followed by Butler and two other soldiers Kim didn't know well. They grabbed her, held her back as she struggled against them, desperate to get free, desperate to answer the call that was screaming inside her skull. "Get her to the aid station," Chen ordered. "Now! And someone get me Captain Rodriguez." They carried Kim down the tower stairs, her struggling the entire way, shouting things she'd later have no memory of saying. The whistling followed them, getting louder and louder until it felt like her head would split open from the pressure of it. The aid station was a small medical facility on the base, staffed by one doctor and two medics. They strapped Kim to a cot, not roughly but firmly, securing her arms and legs so she couldn't hurt herself or anyone else. The doctor, a tired-looking major named Phillips, examined her quickly. Pupils are responsive, vitals are elevated but not dangerous. When did this start? 3 days ago, Chen said, after our first encounter with the Whistler. She's been hearing it constantly ever since. Phillips nodded slowly. I've seen this before. 4 other soldiers in the last 2 months, all with similar symptoms. Auditory hallucinations, compulsive behavior, some kind of psychological break triggered by whatever they encountered out there. He prepared a syringe with a sedative. This should help her sleep. Real sleep, not whatever she's been getting. And when she wakes up, we'll do a full psychological evaluation. The doctor administered the sedative, and Kim felt the world start to fade. The whistling didn't stop, but it became distant, manageable. Her eyes closed, and for the first time in 3 days, she slept without dreams. When she woke, 14 hours had passed. The sun was up, streaming through the windows of the aid station. Chen was sitting beside her cot, reading from a battered paperback novel. He looked up when he heard her stir. "Welcome back," he said quietly. "How do you feel?" Kim took inventory of herself. Her head ached, her muscles were sore from the struggle, but the overwhelming compulsion was gone. And more importantly, the whistling had stopped. Better, I think. Is it still out there? The Whistler? Yeah. It left the base perimeter around dawn, but patrols report seeing it about 2 kilometers north of here, just standing there, watching. Why me? Why did it choose me? Chen closed his book and leaned forward. Doc Phillips has a theory. He thinks it targets whoever has the most psychological stress, whoever's closest to breaking already. You haven't been sleeping well even before this deployment, have you? Kim shook her head. Bad breakup right before we left. I've been taking sleeping pills for months. So, you were already vulnerable. Already running on fumes. And this thing sensed that, picked you out of the squad as the easiest target. Chen paused. The good news is that you fought it off. Once we got you away from the perimeter, got some real rest into you, its influence faded. You're going to be okay. What's the bad news? The bad news is that it's still out there, and it's getting bolder. It came right up to the base perimeter last night, something it hasn't done before. According to the reports, whatever this thing is, whatever it wants, it's escalating. Over the next week, the Whistler appeared every single night, sometimes at the base perimeter, sometimes following patrols, sometimes just visible in the distance, that tall figure standing motionless against the horizon. The whistling became a constant backdrop to life at Phobie Scorpion, so common that soldiers stopped reporting it unless the figure actually approached the wire. But strange things were happening on base. Soldiers were reporting nightmares, always the same one, walking through the Afghan mountains at night, following the sound of whistling, and finding themselves standing before that blank-faced figure with its hundreds of eyes. They'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, unable to go back to sleep. Equipment was going missing. Night vision goggles, ammunition, even someone's rifle disappeared from a locked arms room. When the items were found, they were always placed outside the base perimeter, arranged in a circle around a center point where the dirt had been disturbed, like something had been standing there. And soldiers were changing, becoming more paranoid, more aggressive, more prone to mistakes. During one routine patrol, a soldier nearly shot a local civilian because he thought he saw the Whistler's face in the man's shadow. During another, 2 soldiers got into a fistfight over something trivial, both of them claiming the other had been whistling and wouldn't stop. Captain Rodriguez called a meeting of all squad leaders. Chen attended, along with a dozen other NCOS and several officers. The mood in the room was grim. "We've got a serious problem," Rodriguez began without preamble. "In the last 2 weeks, we've had 15 soldiers report encounters with what they're calling the Whistler. 5 have been medically evacuated for psychological issues. Equipment is going missing, discipline is breaking down, and morale is in the toilet. And command doesn't want to hear about supernatural entities, so officially, none of this is happening. So what do we do?" one of the other squad leaders asked. "We figure out what this thing wants, why it's here, what triggers its appearances, and how to make it go away. To do that, I need volunteers, a small team to go out there, find it, and try to communicate with it, if possible." The room fell silent. Nobody wanted to volunteer for a mission to approach the thing that had been terrorizing the base for weeks. Chen found himself standing up. "I'll do it. My squad has the most experience with this thing. We'll go." Rodriguez looked at him for a long moment. "You're sure?" "No, sir. But somebody has to. And it might as well be us." "All right. Pick 4 soldiers to go with you. You'll have full drone support, quick reaction force on standby, and authority to break contact at any time. But I need you to try, Chen. I need you to find out what this thing is and what it wants before we completely lose control of this base." Chen nodded. He already knew who he'd take: Morrison, Butler, and 2 others who'd proven they could keep their heads under pressure. Kim wanted to come too, insisted she had a right to since she'd been targeted. But Chen refused. She'd been compromised once already. He couldn't risk it happening again. They prepared for 3 days, gathering every piece of information they could find about the Whistler. Rodriguez gave them access to all the classified reports, dozens of encounter stories from different eras going back years. Some patterns emerged. The Whistler appeared most often in a specific valley, about 5 kilometers northwest of FOB Scorpion. It seemed to be nocturnal, rarely appearing during daylight hours. It focused on military personnel, ignoring local civilians entirely. And every soldier who'd gotten within 10 meters of it reported the same thing: an overwhelming sense of dread, a compulsion to approach, and the feeling of being watched by countless unseen eyes. There were also older reports, translated from Russian military documents dating back to the Soviet-Afghan War in the 1980s. The Soviets had encountered something matching the Whistler's description, called it the Shepherd because it seemed to herd their patrols into ambush zones where Mujahideen fighters waited. Several Soviet soldiers had committed suicide after encountering it, leaving notes describing a presence that could see their thoughts, know their fears, and drive them slowly insane. Even older were stories from British colonial forces in the 1800s. Scattered reports in dusty military archives about a whistling demon in the mountains of Afghanistan that preyed on foreign soldiers, appearing as an impossibly tall figure with no face and many eyes. The British had tried everything to kill it: bullets, fire, even artillery bombardment of the valley, where it was most often seen. Nothing worked. It always came back. "So we're hunting something that has been here for at least 200 years, Morrison said as they reviewed the reports. Something that bullets don't work on, and that drives people crazy. This is a great plan, Sergeant." "You got a better idea?" Chen asked. "Run away very fast in the opposite direction? If I could, I would. But that thing is coming for us either way. At least this way, we're choosing the when and where." On the night of the operation, Chen's team stepped off from FOB Scorpion at 2200 hours. They moved in a tight diamond formation, night vision down, weapons ready, each soldier connected by radio and by the understanding that they were walking into something no amount of training could have prepared them for. The Reaper drone overhead tracked their movement, the pilot feeding them constant updates on thermal signatures in the area. For the first hour, everything was quiet. No whistling, no mysterious figures, just a routine patrol through hostile territory. Then they entered the valley. The valley was wrong. That was Chen's first thought as they descended into it, following a rocky path between two steep mountainsides. Everything about it felt wrong. The way the sound echoed, the way the moonlight seemed dimmer here, the way his skin crawled with unexplained dread. Even the air smelled different, musty and old, like they were walking into a tomb that had been sealed for centuries. "Reaper 2-3, this is Shadow 2-1, Chen called over the radio. "We're entering the target valley now. Request continuous thermal surveillance." "Shadow 2-1, Reaper 2-3. Copy that. Be advised, I'm picking up some strange interference on thermal. Lots of heat signatures that keep appearing and disappearing. Could be equipment malfunction, but I've never seen anything like it." "Understood. Keep us posted." The team moved deeper into the valley, weapons up, every sense on high alert. Morrison was on point again, his eyes scanning constantly through night vision. Behind him came Butler, then the other two soldiers, Corporal Davis and Specialist Martinez, with Chen bringing up the rear. They'd covered maybe half the kilometer when Morrison raised his fist. Everyone froze, dropping to one knee. Morrison pointed ahead with two fingers. Enemy. Chen moved forward to his position. "What have you got?" Morrison gestured toward a cluster of ruins about 50 meters ahead. Ancient mud, brick buildings, collapsed walls, the remnants of some village that had been abandoned long ago. Movement in the ruins. Can't tell what it is, but something's moving in there. "Reaper, are you seeing this?" "Negative, Shadow 2-1. Those ruins should be empty. I'm not showing any thermals." But Morrison had seen something. Chen trusted his point man's instincts. "We'll move forward and clear it. Slow and careful." They approached the ruins in tactical formation, each soldier covering a different sector. As they got closer, Chen could see that these weren't recent ruins. The walls were ancient, the stone worn smooth by centuries of wind and sand. In one of the more intact structures, he could see writing carved into the walls, script he didn't recognize, but that looked old, really old. And then he heard it. The whistling. Soft at first, barely audible, coming from somewhere inside the ruins. That same melody, ring around the rosy, but clearer now, more distinct than he'd ever heard it before. "Contact," Chen whispered into his radio. "We've got whistling. Source is inside the ruins." The team moved to the entrance of the largest structure, a building with walls still standing, about 15 feet high, and a partially intact roof. Through his night vision, Chen could see inside, empty space, debris on the floor, and in the center of the room, a figure. The Whistler stood motionless, its back to them, its impossibly tall frame hunched slightly to fit under the ceiling. It was whistling, the sound coming from its blank face, even though it had no visible mouth. As Chen watched, the figure slowly turned to face them. Every soldier froze. Their fingers were on triggers, their training screaming at them to fire, to engage the threat, but something held them back. Maybe it was the sheer wrongness of what they were seeing. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was something else. Some instinctive knowledge that bullets wouldn't work against this thing. The Whistler's face, if you could call it Yad, was exactly as Kim had described during her episode. Completely blank, smooth and featureless, like a mannequin. But its body, Chen had to force himself to look at it. The torso, the arms, the legs, every inch of it, was covered in eyes. Not human eyes, but something else. They were too large, too reflective, and they all moved independently, scanning the room, focusing on each soldier in turn. One of those eyes locked onto Chen, and he felt it. The pressure in his mind, the presence trying to force its way into his thoughts. He could feel it probing, searching through his memories, his fears, his weaknesses. It was looking for the best way to break him, the most efficient path to destroying his sanity. "Don't look directly at it," Chen managed to say, through gritted teeth. "Don't let it make eye contact." But it was too late for Martinez. The specialist had frozen in place, his rifle lowered, his mouth hanging open. His eyes were locked on the Whistler's body, tracking one of the many eyes that stared back at him. And he was walking forward, one slow step at a time, drawn toward the figure like a moth to a flame. "Martinez, stop!" Butler grabbed his arm, but Martinez shook him off with surprising strength and continued forward. "Shadow 2-1, you need to extract now." The Reaper pilot's voice was urgent over the radio. "I'm seeing massive thermal blooms all around your position. Dozens of signatures appearing out of nowhere. You're about to be surrounded." Chen risked a glance around and saw them. More figures, tall and thin like the Whistler, emerging from the ruins, from behind rocks, from the shadows themselves. They formed a circle around Chen's team, closing in slowly, all of them whistling that same melody in perfect unison. The sound was overwhelming, a chorus of discordant notes that seemed to shake the very air. "Break contact! Fall back to the valley entrance," Chen ordered. The team turned to run, but Martinez was still walking toward the Whistler, now only a few feet away from it. The creature reached out with one impossibly long arm, its too many joints bending in ways that defied anatomy. Its fingers, each at least a foot long, stretched toward Martinez's face. Chen didn't think. He lunged forward, grabbed Martinez around the waist, and pulled him backward with all his strength. The Whistler's fingers missed Martinez's face by inches, instead raking across Chen's body armor with enough force to send him stumbling. "Run!" Chen shouted, shoving Martinez toward the others. "Everybody run now." They ran, abandoned tactical discipline, abandoned everything except the desperate need to get out of that valley. Behind them, the whistling grew louder, more insistent, and Chen could hear footsteps, dozens of them, those things pursuing through the darkness. "Reaper, we need immediate close air support." Chen was shouting into his radio as he ran. "I don't care what you hit. Just light up that valley behind us." "Shadow 2-1, I can't get the authorization for airstrikes without clear enemy combatants. What am I supposed to tell Command?" "Tell them whatever you want. We need help now." The team burst out of the valley mouth and into the open desert beyond. Chen risked a look back and saw them still coming, at least 20 of those tall figures gliding across the ground, their many eyes reflecting the moonlight like a field of stars. "Quick reaction force is inbound." Rodriguez's voice came over the radio. "ETA 3 minutes. Can you hold?" 3 minutes. They had to survive for 3 minutes. The team took up defensive positions behind a low ridge, weapons trained on the valley mouth. The whistling was deafening now, so loud it felt like physical pressure against Chen's eardrums. The figures emerged from the valley, spreading out in a line, advancing slowly. They didn't run, didn't rush. They just moved, with that same inexorable patience, knowing that fear would do most of their work for them. "Open fire!" Chen ordered. 5 rifles opened up simultaneously, pouring lead into the approaching figures. Chen saw rounds impact, saw the way the bullets struck home, and then seemed to dissolve, absorbed into those impossibly strange bodies. The figures didn't flinch, didn't slow, didn't react at all. They just kept coming. "It's not working!" Morrison shouted. "Nothing's working." One of the figures was close now, maybe 10 meters away. Chen could see its blank face tilted toward him, could feel the weight of all those eyes focusing on him. The whistling in his head was unbearable, showing him things, terrible things. His worst memories, his deepest fears, all played out in vivid detail inside his mind. He saw his father's death, but distorted, made worse. He saw himself failing, his squad dying because of his mistakes. He saw Kim's face twisted in madness, saw Morrison and Butler torn apart by things that shouldn't exist. And through it all, that whistling, that goddamn whistling that drilled into his brain and wouldn't stop. Chen was on his knees now, he realized. His rifle had fallen from his hands. The figure was reaching for him with those terrible long fingers. This was it. This was how it ended. Not in a firefight with the Taliban, not from an IED, but taken by something that shouldn't exist, driven mad and consumed. The roar of diesel engines and the rattle of heavy machine guns shattered the night. The quick reaction force had arrived, 3 armored Humvees bristling with weapons. The 50 caliber machine guns opened up, tracers lighting up the darkness, pouring rounds into the advancing figures. And for the first time, the figures reacted. They recoiled from the concentrated fire, their smooth advance disrupted. The whistling wavered, lost its perfect harmony. The figure reaching for Chen pulled back, its many eyes swiveling to focus on this new threat. "Get to the vehicles," someone was shouting. "Move! Move, move!" Hands grabbed Chen, pulled him to his feet, dragged him toward the Humvees. He saw Morrison being similarly helped, saw Martinez being practically carried. The machine guns kept firing, putting down a wall of lead between the soldiers and the Whistler's army. They piled into the Humvees, and the convoy took off, racing away from the valley as fast as the heavy vehicles could move. Chen looked back through the armored window and saw the figures standing at the valley mouth, motionless now, watching them go. The whistling was fading, becoming distant, until finally it disappeared entirely. Back at FOB Scorpion, the team was immediately taken to the aid station. Doc Phillips examined each of them, shining lights in their eyes, checking reflexes, asking questions they couldn't really answer. "How do you describe having something alien rifle through your thoughts? How do you explain the feeling of your sanity being systematically dismantled?" "You're all in shock," Phillips finally said. "Severe psychological trauma. I'm recommending all 5 of you be evacuated to Landstuhl for evaluation." "No," Chen said. His voice sounded strange in his own ears, rough and strained. "We stay. We finish the deployment. Sergeant, with all due respect, you're not fit for duty. None of you are. Then we get rest, we recover, and we go back out there. We know more about this thing than anyone else. We've gotten closer to it than anyone else. We can't leave now." Phillips looked like he wanted to argue, but Rodriguez entered the aid station before he could. The captain's face was grim. "Chen, I need your report. Everything that happened in that valley." Chen told him. All of it. The ruins, the multiple figures, the way bullets didn't work, the psychological assault. As he spoke, Rodriguez's expression grew darker. You found their nest, Rodriguez said quietly. We've suspected it was somewhere in that valley, but no one's gotten close enough to confirm it. Until now. What are they? Chen asked. What are we really dealing with here? Rodriguez pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. I don't know if you believe in Djinn, Sergeant. Islamic tradition talks about beings made from smokeless fire, creatures that exist in a parallel dimension, but can interact with our world. The locals here, they have stories about Djinn that prey on soldiers, feed on fear and death. They say these particular Djinn have been in those mountains for thousands of years, long before Islam, long before any modern religion. Ancient things that remember when humans first came to these mountains. You're saying the Whistler is a Djinn? I'm saying the locals think so. And given what you just experienced, what we've all experienced, I'm not inclined to dismiss their beliefs as superstition anymore. Oh, how do we fight it? There has to be a way. The old stories say you can't kill Djinn with conventional weapons, but you can banish them, trap them, or bind them if you know the right rituals. The problem is, those rituals are complex, require specific materials and knowledge that we don't have. Knowledge that's been lost or hidden for centuries. Chen leaned back against the examination table, exhaustion finally catching up with him. So we're stuck with this thing. It's going to keep hunting us, keep driving soldiers crazy, and there's nothing we can do about it. I didn't say that. Rodriguez pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket. There's a man in Kandahar city, a Mullah, religious scholar, supposedly one of the few people left who knows the old ways of dealing with Djinn. I've been authorized to make contact with him, see if he can help us. You think he will? I think he'll be interested in the fact that the Whistler is becoming more active. The locals suffer from it too, even if it focuses primarily on foreign soldiers. If there's a way to stop it, to send it back to wherever it came from, he might know it. When do we meet him? Tomorrow. You and me, small security detail, going into the city, under the guise of a routine liaison meeting. We'll see what he can tell us. Rodriguez stood up. But tonight, you rest. That's an order, Chen. You've been through hell. Take a break. Chen wanted to argue, but his body was making the decision for him. He could barely keep his eyes open. Yes, sir. That night, Chen slept without dreams for the first time since this whole nightmare began. But when he woke in the morning, he found a message carved into the wooden frame of his cot. 3 words in English, scratched deep into the wood, as if by something with very long, very sharp fingers. Kandahar city was a maze of dust-colored buildings, narrow streets, and suspicious eyes watching every move the American convoy made. Chen sat in the passenger seat of the lead Humvee, scanning rooftops and alleyways, his rifle across his lap, finger near the trigger guard. After the encounter in the valley, everything felt like a potential threat. Every shadow could hide something with too many eyes and fingers like knives. You see the message this morning? Rodriguez asked from the driver's seat. Yeah, we see you. Subtle. It knows you're coming for it. It's trying to intimidate you, make you too scared to act. It's working. Rodriguez allowed himself a grim smile. But you're still here. That's what counts. The convoy pulled up to a small mosque in the older part of the city. The Mullah, whose name was Abdul Rashid al-Kandahari, was waiting for them in a courtyard shaded by ancient trees. He was older, maybe 70, with a long white beard and eyes that seemed to look through you rather than at you. He greeted them in accented English. "Captain Rodriguez, I have been expecting you, and you must be Sergeant Chen, the one who went into the valley and survived." He gestured to cushions, arranged in a circle. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." They sat, and tea was served by a young boy who disappeared back into the mosque as silently as he'd arrived. The mullah took a long sip before speaking. "You wish to know about the Whistler?" "Yes." "About the Djinn that hunts in the mountains?" "We want to know how to stop it," Chen said bluntly. "Ah, direct. Very American." The mullah set down his tea. "To stop it, you must first understand what it is. The Whistler is old, Sergeant Chen. Old beyond your comprehension. It was here when Alexander the Great marched through these mountains. It was here when the Mongols came. It has seen empires rise and fall, and it has fed on them all. Fed on them how? Fear, despair, the breaking of the human mind. These things are sustenance to the Djinn. They exist in a realm parallel to ours, a place of smokeless fire and endless hunger. But they can cross into our world under certain conditions, and when they do, they bring madness with them." Rodriguez leaned forward. "The ruins in the valley, are those conditions? Is that how it crosses over?" "Very perceptive, Captain. Yes, those ruins are ancient, built by people whose names have been forgotten by history. They understood the Djinn, knew how to trap them, how to bind them, but they also knew how to summon them, to use them as weapons against their enemies. The ruins are a thin place where the barrier between worlds is weak. The Whistler uses that weakness to manifest in our reality. So, destroy the ruins, destroy its ability to manifest," Chen said. "It is not so simple. The ruins are merely the doorway. The Whistler itself exists beyond such physical constraints. Destroy the ruins, and it will find another thin place, another doorway. You must seal the doorway permanently, and that requires a specific ritual." The mullah reached into his robes and pulled out an ancient book, its pages yellowed and brittle. "This contains the ritual of binding. It must be performed at the ruins, at the exact moment when the barrier is weakest, when the Djinn fully manifests in our world. You will need specific items: salt from the Dead Sea, blood from one who has been touched by the Djinn but survived, and words of power spoken in the old tongue." "I've been touched, Womut," Chen said. "My blood will work?" "If you survived its full attention, if you felt its presence in your mind and resisted, then yes, your blood carries a resonance that can be used against it." The mullah fixed Chen with an intense stare. "But understand, Sergeant, this ritual is dangerous. You will be opening yourself to the Djinn completely, allowing it to see you, truly see you, without any protection. If your will falters, even for a moment, it will take you, body and soul. When is the barrier weakest? Tomorrow night, the new moon, when darkness is absolute and the veil is thinnest. You will have one chance. If you fail, the Whistler will be stronger than ever, and more soldiers will die. Rodriguez spoke up. Can you teach us the ritual? The words we need to say. I can teach, yes, but I cannot accompany you. I am too old, and the Djinn knows me. It would sense my presence and flee before you could bind it. The Mullah opened the book, revealing pages covered in Arabic script. The ritual is complex, but it can be learned. You have until tomorrow night. I suggest you use that time wisely. They spent the rest of the day in that courtyard, the Mullah teaching Djinn and Rodriguez the words, the gestures, the precise sequence of actions required. Djinn committed it all to memory, knowing that in the moment there would be no time to consult notes or ask questions. This had to be perfect. As the sun set and they prepared to leave, the Mullah stopped Djinn at the courtyard gate. Sergeant, a word of advice. The Djinn will show you things tomorrow night. Terrible things. Visions of your deepest fears made manifest. You must remember that they are illusions, lies designed to break your concentration. Hold firm to your purpose, and you will prevail. And if I don't, then you will become like the others, lost to madness, consumed by fear, another victim of the Whistler's endless hunger. That night, back at FOB Scorpion, Djinn gathered his squad, Morrison, Butler, Martinez, Davis, and Kim, who had recovered enough to insist on being included. He told them the plan, explained the ritual, warned them of the dangers. This is voluntary, he said. Anyone who doesn't want to be part of this, I understand. This is beyond what we signed up for. Nobody moved. Nobody backed out. They were his squad, and they were going to see this through together. The next day was spent in preparation. They acquired the Dead Sea salt through a convoluted series of supply chain requests that Rodriguez managed to push through without raising too many questions. Djinn's blood was easy enough to provide, a simple needle prick yielding several vials of the resonance-charged fluid. As night fell, and they prepared to move out, Djinn felt a strange calm settle over him. This was it. Tonight they either stopped the Whistler or they died trying. There was a clarity in that certainty, a peace that came from knowing exactly what was at stake. The team moved out at 2100 hours, heading back to the valley under cover of darkness. The Reaper drone tracked them from above, though Djinn knew from experience that the drone's sensors wouldn't be much help once they entered the ruins. This was going to come down to human will against Djinn power, and thermal imaging didn't count for much in that equation. They entered the valley as midnight approached. The whistling started immediately, that familiar melody echoing off the mountains. But Djinn was ready for it this time. He'd spent all day practicing mental exercises the Mullah had taught him, techniques for shielding his mind from external influence. It wasn't perfect. The whistling still set his teeth on edge, but he could function through it now. The ruins loomed ahead, ancient and menacing in the moonless dark. Through night vision, Djinn could see the central building, the one where they'd encountered the Whistler before. Light was emanating from within. Not natural light, but something else. A sickly green glow that pulsed in rhythm with the whistling. "It's already manifesting," Morrison said quietly. "It knows we're here." "Good. We want it fully present for this to work." Chen pulled out the materials for the ritual, the salt, the blood, the carefully transcribed words of power. "Everyone take your positions. Create a perimeter around the ruins. Do not enter the building no matter what you see or hear. Hold the line." His squad moved to their positions without question, forming a defensive circle around the ancient structure. Chen and Rodriguez approached the entrance alone, Chen carrying the ritual components, Rodriguez providing security with his rifle up and ready. They entered the building, and the temperature dropped immediately. Breath frosted in the air, despite it being a warm Afghan night. The green light was brighter inside, pulsing from the center of the room where the Whistler stood. It was bigger than before, Chen realized. The ritual was allowing it to manifest more fully in their reality, and as it grew more solid, its true size became apparent. It had to be at least 12 feet tall, with limbs that seemed to stretch and compress like liquid. And those eyes, hundreds of them, all focusing on Chen and Rodriguez as they entered. The whistling was deafening now, no longer a melody, but a shriek that threatened to shatter Chen's concentration. He forced himself to move forward, to begin drawing the circle of salt around the Whistler, reciting the first words of the binding in the ancient tongue the Mullah had taught him. The Whistler reacted immediately. It lunged toward Chen, those impossibly long fingers reaching, but something stopped it. The circle wasn't complete yet, but even the partial barrier was enough to slow it. Chen continued the ritual, moving around the creature in a clockwise direction, completing the salt circle while speaking words that felt foreign on his tongue, but somehow right, somehow powerful. Rodriguez covered him, rifle trained on the Whistler, even though they both knew bullets were useless. But the presence of another human, another mind standing firm against the Djinn, provided additional strength to Chen's will. The circle was complete. Chen opened the first vial of his blood and began sprinkling it on the salt, mixing his essence with the binding material. The Whistler screamed, not with voice, but with mind, a psychic assault that dropped Chen to his knees. Visions flooded his consciousness. He saw his squad torn apart, their bodies twisted into impossible shapes. He saw himself as the Whistler, looking out through 100 eyes, feeling the hunger that drove it to hunt. He saw the future, a timeline where he failed, where the Djinn escaped and spread beyond Afghanistan, where soldiers around the world fell victim to its whistle. But he also saw something else. He saw the past, the people who had built these ruins, who had first summoned the Whistler to use as a weapon against their enemies. He saw their civilization fall because they couldn't control what they'd unleashed. He saw centuries of suffering, of soldiers and civilians alike driven mad by the creature they'd created. And he understood. The Whistler wasn't evil, not in the way humans understood evil. It was hungry, desperate, trapped between worlds, and feeding on the only sustenance available to it, fear. It had been bound once before, trapped in those ruins for centuries, until modern warfare weakened the original binding, enough for it to break free. Chen stood up, blood dripping from his nose, his ears, but his voice steady as he spoke the final words of the ritual. Not words of destruction or hatred, but words of sending, words of peace. He wasn't killing the Whistler. He was sending it home, back to the realm of smokeless fire where it belonged, where it wouldn't hunger anymore. The creature's screaming shifted, became something else. Not fear, but relief. It had been trapped for so long, separated from its kind, alone in a world that wasn't meant for it. The binding was a kindness, a release. The green light intensified until Chen had to close his eyes against the glare. The whistling reached a crescendo, then suddenly stopped. Complete silence filled the ruins, more profound than any Chen had ever experienced. When he opened his eyes, the Whistler was gone. The salt circle remained, but the space within it was empty. The temperature returned to normal. The oppressive presence that had filled the building lifted, leaving only ancient stone and dust. "Is it done?" Rodriguez asked quietly. Chen nodded, too exhausted to speak. They'd done it. The Whistler was gone, sent back to where it belonged, the doorway sealed behind it. No more soldiers would be driven mad by its presence. No more midnight whistling would echo through the mountains. Outside, the squad was waiting, weapons ready, expecting a fight. But the fighting was done. Chen collapsed as soon as he exited the building, caught by Morrison and Butler before he hit the ground. "Get him on the bird," Rodriguez ordered. A medevac helicopter was already inbound, summoned by the captain as soon as the ritual finished. "He needs medical attention." As Chen was loaded onto the stretcher, he looked back at the ruins one last time. In his mind, he could still hear it, faint and distant, but different now. Not threatening, not hunting, just grateful. The Whistler's final whistle, a farewell from something that had finally found peace.